We were all a bit shocked by test scores, which were released this week on America's school children. The drop in their testing scores predates COVID, so the problems are deeper than a single disease. We spoke earlier with Professor Nicholas Giordano, a fellow at Campus Reform's Higher Education Fellowship, to give us his diagnosis. Professor, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is not new to you. You've seen this decline happening in real time during your studies, and I suspect that it long predates your tenure as an academician, right?
It certainly does. I mean, we've been seeing a decline for the last 30 years, whether they want to admit it or not, in academia. The fact is that standards have been lowered, and so if we look at proficiency ratings, while they may have been flat for a while, if we factor in the lower standards, the proficiency levels are even lower than we could imagine. And a lot of people don't know that, 12th grade textbooks are written at 7th grade reading levels. Mm-hmm. And it shows you how almost we've dumbed down the system and created a system where we just cycle students through the process. The reality is that COVID was simply the final nail in the coffin. It exposed something that was always inevitable, that people would become aware that we're not really educating students anymore.
Well, yeah, and so I wonder if the term decline is a misnomer in some respects, that it's much worse. You wrote, let me quote from you, "The American public education system, K through 12, has collapsed, setting up our children and our nation for failure. For nearly 2 decades, I've been on the front lines witnessing this devastation firsthand as a community college professor." Is there a core cause?
No, there's multiple factors involved. And I wrote the piece for Campus Reform really to highlight it, because I don't think people speak about it often enough. I mean, we had the proficiency ratings released Sunday night by the Department of Education. And it's about this time that, we speak about it a little bit, but this is a tragedy that's occurring. We're failing these students. And how long are we going to last as a superpower in the world if we're not producing people that are well educated? Mm-hmm. So we've seen this coming for a long time. And it has to do with academia as a whole. You have curriculums that are being developed that aren't teaching students basic facts, nor are they teaching students how to think critically. We've seen the family units change, single parents households, even 2-parent households, both parents are working. The mindset of the student has changed, and teachers have changed themselves. There are some really great teachers out there, but we also have a lot of ideologues within the system that's creating a problem.
Mm-hmm. And you also wrote, "It is my duty," and this is really refreshing in this day and age, "it is my duty to get my students to open their minds, to think critically, and challenge their preconceived biases. If a student brings up a liberal argument, I will challenge them from a conservative point of view. And likewise, if a student takes a conservative argument, I will challenge them from a liberal point of view." That's almost heretical in today's college environment.
Well, and that's part of the problem in the education system as a whole, that it's about ideology. It's not my job to force my position on the issues on my students. It's my job to get them to think. That's what education was all about. When I was going to school, I had professors that were communist, but they loved the debate. They had a passion for education. We seem to have lost that. It seems that these people, they go through college, they get their PhDs, they start teaching, and instantly they believe that their ideology is more important than the subject material. And in reality, a lot of them haven't even mastered the subject material.
Let me raise an anecdote to you, and I just want to get your reaction to it. I was watching a clip on Twitter yesterday of this provocateur. His name is Alex Stein. I guess he's a conservative comedian. And he was scheduled to speak at Penn State University this week. He was interrupted by a mob of students, some of them with bullhorns. He confronted the mob, very courageous of them to walk into the belly of the beast. But they were simply screaming profanity at him, 4-letter words nonstop. And when that failed, one young lady just came up and hocked a great big giant loogie across his blue suit.
Disgusting.
That's not what you should be doing in college.
No.
The fact that it's reduced to that, to some sort of primitive behavior of spitting on somebody because you disagree with their viewpoints, speaks volumes to me. What are your thoughts about it?
Well, it tells me how campuses have changed. So college campuses used to be the laboratories of thought, the laboratories of speech. And if you didn't like someone's idea, you actually debated them, brought up facts, brought up your arguments in a cohesive way, and then you have the debate, and that's it. End of story. You still respected the other person's opinion. In today's day and age, if you look, it's just invectives they throw out. So I don't agree with everything Alex Stein says. But if you want to debate him, that's fine. But if you're just throwing out invectives, saying curse words, it shows that you don't have an argument, that it's pure emotion and hate. And that's not the way education actually works. Education is about thought. It's about reason. It's about logic. It's about thinking critically about the issues.
Professor Nicholas Giordano, thank you so much. Really appreciate this. It's so important.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, this evening, a familiar face from the early days of TBN has died. You might remember Jerry Bernard. He was a recording artist, an author, and a pastor, and he was on the air frequently with the late Paul and Jan Crouch. Jerry served as pastor in San Diego and Daytona Beach, Florida, but his ministry took him to all corners of the world. He was married to Sandy Bernard for over 70 years, and Sandy issued this statement on his passing, quote, "My dearest Jerry left this life for his eternal life, surrounded by his children and receiving calls and kisses from his great-grandchildren. TBN is grateful for the contribution Jerry Bernard made, helping to build this network and sending our message of hope and grace literally around the world." And that's going to do it for Centerpoint tonight. I'm Doug McKelway. We hope you have a great night.